And because we're at the end, I'd like to just say to you that my generation has done a terrible job. We're leaving you with a world it's too conflicted, it's too unjust, it's too unstable, it's too unsustainable, and it's going to be up to you and your generation to fix these things. And when it comes to the future, people have called me a futurist. I don't like that term at all, because I think the future is not something to be predicted, it's something to be achieved. But it's going to be you and your generation that will achieve a new future. And don't give up, because the stakes are very, very high, not just for your company or industry, but for the world. Technology. It's clear that we are in a new digital age, and things are changing very rapidly. Let me talk about 6 themes of technology in a few seconds each, and then to give my views on how this is all about to change because of something new. The main themes of the current revolution that are underway are, first of all, of course, the social web. And it's not just that we have 2 billion people on Facebook, but to me, social media is becoming a new means of production. It's beginning to change the way that we orchestrate capability in society to innovate, to create goods and services, or to find a place to stay. Secondly, we have the rise of the mobile web, and this is very powerful. It's hard to describe or exaggerate. I was in Kenya, in Samburu land, in the middle of nowhere, and I met on a safari, and I met a goat herder. She was 14 years old. She had no water, she drank goat's milk, she had no electrical power, but through a solar charger, she powered her mobile device, and that device could call up a browser. Now, she's 14 years old, she's married to a 65-year-old, she's pregnant with her second child. He's mistrustful of this device. She knows about goat prices, and she's developing literacy. She's learning about how women are in other parts of the world. The cognitive dissonance for her is a little vignette for me about the huge impact of mobility. Thirdly, we have the rise of big data. Now, you've all heard lots of discussions about how big data is. I think it's big in the sense that this is a new asset class, and it's beginning to rival previous asset classes in history. Originally land, industrial plant, then money, and big data is now enabling companies to build fortunes that may exceed the previous fortunes of people like Rockefeller and Standard Oil. We have the Internet of Things. This is billions, soon trillions of inert objects in our world that become smart communicating devices. My hotel room across the street, the door has a chip in it. I don't have my key, and it's a new hotel, so the door has an IP address. The door is an internet appliance. I had a camera stolen from a hotel in Miami, and the door knew about me. It knew who'd been in and out of the room. We found an unauthorized access. Then we have the rise of the cloud. Think of the internet as being a computer. Thomas Watson was famously to have said in 1950 that the world will only need 5 computers. And everyone made fun of him for 60 years. I think actually he was about right, wasn't he? We have the Google computer and the Apple computer and the Amazon computer, and there might be 6 or 7. Finally is the rise of robotics. And this is hard to imagine the impact that this is beginning to have, both positive and negative. Positive in the sense that robots can do all kinds of dangerous or boring things that humans do. But it turns out that this is also targeted right at knowledge work. So robots dispense pharmaceuticals better than druggists, and robots diagnose humans better than doctors. And it turns out robots drive cars better than people. The Google car has gone 2 million miles. It's only had 1 accident when it was rear-ended from behind by a human. So this is the current wave of technology, and we are moving into the second half of the chessboard, where to me the rate of acceleration is now so fast that it's getting beyond our comprehension as individuals and organizations, let alone our ability to manage it. Now that's been the first 4 years of the digital age. I think it's all about to change because of something new. You see, the internet has been great, it's created all kinds of wonderful things, but actually it's, in terms of creating this true peer-to-peer world that we can begin to get a glimpse of with companies like Airbnb, it's not been very successful, and the reason is that we can exchange information peer-to-peer, but we can't exchange value, like money. I can't send you money without an intermediary, a powerful bank, a credit card company, a government, somebody to authenticate who I am and who you are. And this has meant that, to me, the digital age has been captured by powerful forces that get asymmetrical benefit. Wall Street, huge Silicon Valley companies, and even governments that are now using it to create a surveillance society. What if we could exchange value peer-to-peer? Well, that's the next 40 years of the internet, and it's based on, you'll be surprised to hear this, the underlying technology of the digital currency Bitcoin. It's called the blockchain. And remember that word today. And I'm going to be speaking about this in this room tomorrow at more length. But you'll remember the word blockchain like you may remember the word internet in 1994. And the blockchain is an extraordinary technology that enables us to do peer-to-peer commerce and transactions without powerful forces. And Bitcoin may or may not succeed, but that's not what's important. What's important is the biggest innovation in computer science in a generation underlies Bitcoin. And if you don't know about it, you should learn about it. The good news on that is that this is the topic of my new book. It's called The Trust Protocol, and it comes out in April. Thank you very much.
Let me try to introduce the debate by making two remarks. First, suppose that we had a panel like this at the beginning of the 20th century, that is, perhaps even in 1912. I think we could have predicted a lot of things in terms of technology, in terms of demography, etc., but certainly not World War I and even less World War II. And I say that because my field is international affairs in general. Now, all these trends are fascinating, those you have described. They can and should be positive in many, many ways, but nonetheless, there are huge adjustment problems for our societies, because that's the interplay between technology, society, politics. And just to take one example, take the refugee problem today. The refugee problem today in Europe is magnified by modern technologies. You know, most of these people, they have their mobiles, you know, and they can communicate with at home, and they can they encourage actually the increasing flux of people moving and so forth and so on. So my question to each of you would be, what is your own vision, each of you, of the interplay of those various technological, social, political forces? What are the key points that will affect the next 10 to 15 years or to 20 years positively, but also negatively? Because it is only if we understand clearly the negative forces that we have a chance to overcome them. So, Don, you would like to start?
Sure. This is a great contradiction, isn't it? We have this digital age. We have a new medium of human communications that has unlimited possibilities. So, let's look at the world today in terms of objective measures. The world has never been more volatile, more conflicted. We have structural, growing unemployment. People like me had hoped that technology would contribute to jobs. But I think that Jason is right. You're looking at whole sectors of the workforce, including white-collar work, that are about to be eliminated. Isn't technology supposed to bring prosperity? Well, we have growing wealth creation, but the median income of individuals and families in most OECD countries is no longer increasing. In fact, it's declining, and we have growing social inequality. Not to mention a whole set of other problems like climate change. I mean, you mentioned the migration problem, and I was there in Hungary watching people come across the border. That's like 2 million people. Imagine when 1.5 billion people lose most of their water supply, which according to scientists will occur not 100 years from now, in the next 10 to 15 years. Huge migrations, war, conflict, rise of new terrorist organizations. How can this be? How is this possible? Well, to me, technology doesn't create societies, it doesn't create equality, it doesn't create peace, it doesn't create justice. People do. And this new medium of communications, unlike the old media that was centralized in one way and where we were all passive recipients, the new medium is interactive. It's controlled initially by no one. It's peer-to-peer. But what's happened, I was talking to Tim Berners-Lee, who invented the World Wide Web, and about the situation today where many of the applications that we get are not even on the web. They're on these proprietary walled gardens controlled by big companies like Apple. And he says this, I think what's happened is this peer-to-peer technology was laid on top of a society that's anything but peer-to-peer. It's controlled by powerful class forces. You have governments that use technology typically not to help citizens, but to get reelected or to control citizens in their proprietary internets now all around the world, and not just in the country of Iran. So to me, this is a long conversation, I'll end it. We were talking about this before. To me, I think we need a new social contract in society. We need a new agenda for the digital age. It's formed not just by governments, but by the private sector, civil society, NGOs, academics, foundations. Because when we went from the agrarian age to the industrial age, we figured some things out. We developed a new agenda. People were moved to the cities. We figured out they needed to have a social safety net. People were working in factories. They needed to be literate. We mandated public education. Everybody had to go to school. We figured out you have public companies, they ought to tell their shareholders how they're doing. Public companies didn't have to tell their shareholders anything in the United States until the SEC Act of 1934. We figured out you can't have huge monopolies owning everything. I don't think we've done any of that today. And this is a huge challenge for every policymaker, for every corporation as well, because business can't succeed in a world that's failing. And business leaders need to step up now to these big social issues, in my mind. I think large corporations, large traditional corporations, should share a lot of their intellectual property. Now, what do I mean by that? We have this view, I'm a company. I create my intellectual property. It's the foundation of my competitiveness. Someone tries to infringe it, I'll sue them, and I'll get out my lawyers. Well, that's the industrial mentality, and it didn't work so well for, say, the record industry that saw a technology disruption and they took a legal response. And now the third largest source of revenue for the US labels is suing people. No, it makes sense to have a portfolio of intellectual property if you're a big company. Some that you own and protect, and some that you share. Now let me give you an example. Linux, when it first came along, Microsoft called Linux communist. They said, or at least leading spokesperson for Microsoft said, What is this, an operating system developed in a commons? No, that should be done by private companies. And all the computer companies took the same reaction because that's how they competed on the base of their operating platform. Microsoft had an operating platform, and so did IBM and Hewlett-Packard and so on. And IBM had an epiphany. They wondered what would happen if we embraced Linux. They gave away $400 million of software to the Linux community, and in doing so, they created a multi-billion-dollar platform for hardware, software, and services. They saved themselves $900 million a year developing their own proprietary operating system, and they also got to stick it to Microsoft. Probably not in that order of importance. But they kept Microsoft out of the enterprise. So you look at every industry. This is true what I'm saying. I met some people earlier from the pharmaceutical industry. The big pharmaceutical companies have fallen off the patent cliff, where right now, in the last year, they've lost 25% to a third of their entire revenue because of patented drugs going generic. What do? You know, buy fewer staplers? No. You have to change your whole business model. The pharmaceutical companies should place clinical trial research in a commons. They should start sharing their clinical trial research, and like Linux, you compete on a higher level on drug delivery systems or packaging or marketing or customer relationships and so on. This is true in every industry. Companies need to stop thinking they ought to own all their IP, and they should start sharing more of it, not because they're communists, because this is capitalism at its best for a digital age. I think we have a big problem. We have a crisis of legitimacy of our democratic countries all around the world. The US Congress being Exhibit A. Congress is controlled by big money. And 92% of the US population would like to see a law passed. This is a simple law that there be background checks for the purchase of firearms. 92% of the population want that, but Congress can't pass a law reflecting the will of 92%. So more and more young people around the world are saying, I'll look for other ways to change the world than the democratic process. And more young people agree with that bumper sticker, don't vote, it only encourages them. We have to fix this. You see, because democracy is the best system that we know of. But this is not just true in the United States. Everywhere, people wonder if our democratic institutions are going to be the appropriate ways of solving problems. And this is calling on a whole new generation of political leaders. I think Justin Trudeau is one of them. Do you know how he just won the election in Canada? He was attacked by the other party with traditional negative advertising, toxic attack ads that basically distort a person's point of view and tend to eliminate voting altogether. And he said, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stand up and say what I believe in. And he just won a landslide victory. And the reason is because of young people who have grown up digital, and they know that this negative attack ads are cynical and they destroy the democratic process rather than advancing them. So that election that just happened 3 hours ago is a lesson to political leaders all around the world that you need to start to show integrity even if you want to get elected.
Good afternoon. I'm Suyeon Hongbu, a high schooler. So while I was listening to the discussion today, so we have been making great accomplishments in technology, in developing new ideology, and as mentioned, sharing economy. But also mentioned in the discussion today, I believe we are faced with many crises, the demographic cliff, and also the climatic changes or crises that are to come in the years. And so I believe there are limits that are really difficult to overcome, as mentioned previously. So do you believe that such limits can actually be overcome by technology or adjusted by technology? Or do you believe that there might be limits that really can't be, that are really an impasse for the humanity? So I was just wondering if you had any views about that, that technology might be able to overcome this big crisis we are facing in maybe 2050s or, yeah.
Don't think about technology solving problems. Think in that way. That problems get solved by people using tools, and technology is one. And because we're at the end, I'd like to just say to you that my generation has done a terrible job. We're leaving you with a world it's too conflicted, it's too unjust, it's too unstable, it's too unsustainable, and it's going to be up to you and your generation to fix these things. And when it comes to the future, you know, people have called me a futurist. I don't like that term at all, because I think the future is not something to be predicted, it's something to be achieved. But it's going to be you and your generation that will achieve a new future. And don't give up, because the stakes are very, very high, not just for your company or industry, but for the world.